Thanks for coming. I'm just going to start. I have lots of stuff to say. There's no space for an artwork. It's a thing that doesn't belong. There's no room for it. There isn't any space for it. It's a thing without a space. I wanted to make something invisible. I wanted to disappear. I walked up a hillside. I went out for a walk. I went out looking for work in the woods. I was looking for work to do. I had to leave New York, and I built myself this tent in the woods. I went out looking for someone. I was out looking for something, for a place to be alone, a place to lay my head, a home. I dug a hole in the ground to hide in, alone. I dug a hole and got in. I dug a hole and buried myself in it. I got in Oregon. I'd been in touch with Bert and Holly Davis, a couple who've been living in the woods for the past 30 years, living in shelters like this one, dug into remote hillsides and covered with a clear plastic tarp. You can see the diagram there. By angling the tarp to reduce the reflections, you can make a comfortable shelter for two people, which is almost impossible to see unless you stumble on it. I went out trying to find Bert and Holly, but they wouldn't meet me in person. It was too risky. I had some personal reasons for wanting to do this. That's true. I was on the run from the law. And I think that's important, though I'm not really going to talk about that. But what it helped me understand is that an artwork doesn't need a space. It needs to make a space for itself. It needs to be alone. It is a space. It seemed to me that what Bert and Holly had done beyond their architectural work, or even beyond this incredible accomplishment of publishing their zine, Dwelling Portably, out of this tent in the woods for the last 30 years, they devoted themselves completely to this kind of hardcore living experiment, an experiment in personal autonomy. It's a really brutal project. And I'm not physically brave enough to do it. But I thought that would be a good frame of reference for an artistic project. I'm someone who gets frustrated with the way that meaning is constructed in an artwork. I don't really have a lot of patience for ideas, for the oblique. There's no place for ideas in sculpture. It's a field of things, not ideas. That's a structure I found in the hillside of in New Mexico, and it's obviously a kind of incomplete project. And it's something that inspired me a lot. And that's a project I built with my brother, Eli, in Kodiak, Alaska. We wanted to make a shelter in the woods, and we exhibited just this photograph for a show that we had, and it was a way of creating a situation where you're in the exhibition and you have to think of another space, and this was that other space, very remote. Bert and Holly, they have a lifestyle that it's a pragmatic demonstration, a pragmatic philosophy of total individual freedom. The idea is that by accepting a complete alienation from social life, basically by not ever talking to another person, by living in the woods, cutting off any direct contact with other people, you can have an actual state of unencumbered personal freedom. You can really be free. It's a high price to pay, but I thought about that as a kind of institutional critique from the outside. So in a really literal way, that was my point of departure. I just said, well, by the same logic, if you took that pragmatic definition of autonomy and applied it to an object, then an artwork can be autonomous. It can have its own space. It doesn't need a space. It doesn't need lights, a ceiling, heating, a floor. It doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need an audience. It don't need you. The work became invisible. It disappeared.